Good evening. Welcome to Anacortes City Council meeting for July 26th, the year 2021. Mayor Gear is taking a couple days off, so as Mayor Pro Tem, I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. So, Ms. Hunt, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Carter, Mr. Young,
Here.
Mr. Walters,
Here.
Mr. McDougall,
Here.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Here.
Ms. Moulton,
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's rise and take the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, on to announcements and committee reports. And our first report is the COVID report tonight. And we actually, as you all can see, we're all masked up here. We had some late breaking news this afternoon from the Skagit County Department of Health, basically issuing a guidance recommending that all individuals, regardless of virus or vaccination status, should be wearing masks indoors. And they reiterate within the announcement that, emphasize the point that vaccination is and will continue to be the absolute best tool we have to stop the spread of COVID-19. All right, so that said, specifics of the report. As of yesterday's numbers, we've had a total of 5,492 positive cases in Skagit County, 79 fatalities, and 373 hospitalized. We currently have a case rate of just under 43 per 100,000 over the last 14 days. However, over the last week, we've had 79 new cases in Skagit County over the last 7 days. So that case rate is definitely on the rise. Looking through my list here. A total of 152,769 vaccine doses have been administered, and we are at roughly 64.3% of Skagitonians 12 years and older at least partially vaccinated, 55.2% fully vaccinated. And local data shows that from the time period of March 1 through July 13 of this year, 96% of all COVID cases were in unvaccinated individuals. And this perfectly highlights the effectiveness of the COVID-19 vaccines. All right, and that's the COVID report for today. Next, we have the Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee.
Mr. McDougall.
Mr. Walters.
The Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee met last week. Myself, Ms. Carolyn Moulton, Christine Cleland McGrath. We heard from one of the homeless people who previously had been living on T Avenue, who reached out to our committee, and we invited them to brief us on how they got there, why they were there, how they were able to exit T Avenue. And just real briefly, because the story is kind of involved and we don't have to go into all of it now, because we're continuing to work on our identification of gaps in services, and we'll ultimately report more fully to council. But real briefly, she had been living in Anacortes for 20 years. She was almost 50. She had a husband and a cat. They couldn't hold their jobs when her mom was in 24/7 care. They lost their house after her mom died. Couldn't pay last month's rent and a deposit to get new housing. So they ended up buying a motorhome because that was what they figured out they could do. And then had difficulty keeping a job because employers, as she said, don't give you a real good chance after finding out you're homeless. They were not immediately inclined to go to T Avenue, but they went to T because it was someplace not by houses. They figured that they weren't bothering anybody. It was more low impact, and they weren't getting sleep elsewhere. They didn't feel safe parked in somebody's yard. They didn't feel safe in a tent in the woods. I think it was an impactful story because it demonstrates just one person's story. It helped indicate that everybody down there has a story and that they're all different. And we heard, some of the other stories from her experience with talking to other people down there as well. But now she's at the First Step Center in Burlington. Initially, she was inclined not to go there because she didn't want to be told what to do, because she's an adult, didn't want to be with other people they didn't know, but they decided to go there because it has 24/7 security. They were able to take their RV, their one major possession. They get 3 good meals a day. She felt like they really had a sense of relief there. She also said that the people there are awesome, and the people who run it are awesome. And the gates are locked during the night, but you can get allowance if you work on the night shift. So really, she is enjoying that experience. She lives in a very small home with her husband now, a pallet home, about 64 square feet. And there are also bigger ones if you have more people in your family. There's a total of 45 cabins, and 22 or so are occupied now. But it's also only a 90-day program. You get help with mental health, employment, other physical health services, and help transitioning into other housing. But at the end of 90 days, you're done. So I would say it was a very illuminating conversation. We also had a visit from the Housing Authority and from Sheila Pritchett, who runs Mom's Closet, another service in town. And we began to identify some gaps where people on T and potentially other homeless that are identified in town haven't been referred to the Housing Authority, which has a long wait list, but it also gives preference to people in town, so you're able to skip through a lot of that wait list if you're Anacortes residents. So we're trying to make that connection, make sure that our social worker that we've contracted with the Family Center is giving those applications, that the Housing Authority is getting a complete application, because there are also some other barriers, including not having a Social Security card, which prevents you from completing the full application. Trying to make some allowance there so that you can get into the queue even if you haven't yet gotten a replacement Social Security card from Social Security yet, because there's a backlog there as well. We have changed our meeting time to Thursdays at 9 a.m. so we can be sure to get representatives from these agencies, Housing Authority and Family Center being number 1 and number 2 and number 3, maybe also the Salvation Army, on our list at every meeting to make sure that they are interacting and coordinating. And then we talked a little bit about Unite Washington, which is this web service run by a couple of medical providers, health insurance providers in the state of Washington, that has recently come to Skagit County. It is intended to refer people between agencies so that agencies that are offering service know what other services other agencies offer, and you can instantly make the connection from a person in need between those agencies. We're trying to get the city signed up so that we can try it out. It's a free service, and see if it works for us, if there's not too much duplicate data entry or those kinds of things. That would help, theoretically, fill one of the major gaps that we've found, which is an information gap in what people know other agencies provide as services. So more to come. We're going to pick up the pace a little bit here as we meet, as we change our meeting time and get more involved with some of these agencies coming to our meetings every time.
Mr. McDougall?
Ms. Moulton?
I just wanted to mention that the Thursday morning meeting time at 9 starts a week from this Thursday, 9 a.m., and now the HACS committee will be meeting weekly because, so we can accomplish more.
All right, thank you both. Next, we have the Fiber Committee meeting, and because we just had the Fiber Department give a report last Monday, I'll just kind of give the quick highlights. So key items are, we're scheduled to be interviewing candidates for the second installation crew August 2nd, so that's coming right up. The team is still in process in pursuing a couple of significant funding opportunities, grants. We're not going to know for a little while yet on both of those. And then very quickly, the numbers, we've broken ground on the west end, so targeting like late summer, maybe early fall to start actually activating customers in the west end. And on the numbers side, as of last Thursday, we had 811 total customers connected. About 700 of those are residential, about 118 business customers. And in our 3 trial areas, we are at roughly about 45 to 46% total market share, or customer signups. So that's really good. And then in the 2020 aerial areas, our expansion, kind of in the east end of town, we're at 33.6% signup. So we're very near our 35% threshold there. And the entire town, we're at about a 27% signup threshold. So we're, for the entire town, 80% of the way to our 35% goal signup-wise. So that's the highlights for the fiber report. Next item, the Planning Committee.
Thank you. So right before our meeting at 5 o'clock, Ms. Moulton and Mr. Walters and I had our Planning Committee meeting. We really kind of focused on our potential partnership with Habitat for Humanity. It's been identified that there's about a 16,500 square foot lot on West 5th that is owned by the city. We've been in talks with them for a number of weeks or months now, but wanted to give a quick update that Ms. Swetnam, the city attorney, is reviewing the the MOU, and will then review the lease agreement and hopefully bring it to council, so that at least we can have a tentative discussion on that potential project. Now, this is actually a parcel that was identified for a park, so we will need to identify a other parcel, which we have that is currently a storm drain collection pond area, but may no longer need to be in use. So that could be a potential park just nearby on West 6th. But we just are hoping that we can keep moving that along. It would be a really good opportunity for the community and a great kind of first partnership with Habitat for Humanity. Beyond that, we just kind of went through the long list of items the planning department is going to get through through the end of 2021, which I will quickly go through. The Planning Commission is going to learn more about the floodplain management system, and that'll be introduced in the next couple weeks. R4, the daycare zoning, comp plan, development regulation updates. Short-term rentals, we're going to try to move forward a little bit faster pace than the comp plan and development regulations. And then finally, the shoreline master plan. So a lot of things happening with the planning department. That's it.
All right,
Mayor
thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem. Now, if I might, I'd like to add that the TPA Advisory Board had a great update that I thought it was time that I began sort of updating not only council but the public about the progress that's being made. We will hire someone by August 18th, and last week we had 3 interviews, final interviews. There were 12 candidates submitted for review, but the final 3, the Tourism Advisory Board met with them in separate rooms in Burlington, and I think we have some stellar candidates. The search firm did a tremendous job for whittling down through all of the applicants to specifically what we were needing here in Skagit County. I mean, just sort of things vary between town to town, but yet there's a common thread that we have. And so they did a superb job. So we expect to have that person hired by the 18th. And as soon as that starts, what it will really be for just a short period of time is a department of 1, but with a stellar support cast from across the county. I do think that it would be something good for the county. I think our timing is just perfect for as we try to come out economically and sort of begin to promote all of the wonderful stuff that we have here in Skagit County. And I do believe that the candidates that we will choose from really will bring it, and I look forward to having them come and give us a personal update. And then you will also meet someone that I believe will be wonderful and will fit into our county very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Any other announcements up at the dais here? All right, at this point, we'll move to section 4 of the meeting and public comment. And this is an opportunity for anyone in the audience to speak to any issue that is not on the official agenda. Mr. Hupperman?
Good evening, Council. My name is Wim Huppermans. I live at 3412 K Avenue. I want to talk about something small, but I do think it has more value than just that. On July 15th, I reported a code violation and made the complaint about 4 political yard signs on commercial that were each 32 square foot in size. Our ordinance limits yard signs to...
Mr. Hupperman, would you speak closer to the microphone? I'm sort of having trouble hearing you, maybe because of the masks too.
Sure.
But yeah, thank you.
I thought I did it even better. Okay. On July 15th, I reported a code violation about 4 large political yard signs on commercial. Actually, there were 2 and 1 business, but I lost my thread. So I reported that violation. In the week following, nothing happened. With political yard signs, it is a time-sensitive thing. I came back here to City Hall. I left a call, but nothing has happened. And overall, political yard signs are not a big deal. The world's not in danger. And the campaigns can easily replace those signs with smaller, legal-sized ones. But it does highlight that we do not do code enforcement. Ms. Cleland McGrath mentioned VRBOs. I've always heard that there are lots of not licensed VRBOs in Anacortes. Why do we allow unlicensed VRBOs? Why is there not code enforcement? Pretty soon you will vote for a critical area ordinance with lots of do's and don'ts. Again, lots of ordinances, or maybe it's 1, but lots of do's and don'ts. And again, will those only apply to those that want to follow them? Because there's no code enforcement. So I think this is not criticism to the planning department. I think it's criticism to you, council members. You should provide those resources. And let it be there. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the council at this time? Yeah? Go ahead, come on up. We ask that you please state your name. You don't need to state your address, though. Just actually, FYI for anyone, when addressing the council, we no longer need to state an address.
Hi, my name is Lynn Johansson. My address is 904 26th Street, Anacortes. And I was caught in the middle of a sale when my landlord sold out in January. The new landlord asked me for a list of things that were wrong with the house. So I gave it to him. And a week later, I got eviction papers. I haven't been able to find another rental for me and my bigger dog. I'm looking for an older house where I can bring in 2 or 3 other roommates to make a go of it. Meanwhile, the new landlord has destroyed some of my property. He brought in what I call the mean machine and demolished my shed and the dog's big house. I can't even get into my freezer on the front porch. The front porch has a lot of stuff on it he told them not to touch, but they demolished my patio bricks, my spruce tree, They made me take down all my fencing. I was lucky enough to store it at my girlfriend's. But I have no place to go yet. And I think he'll flip the house eventually. He plans to move the contractor into it to work on it. But there are no rentals for the local people anymore. There's too much house flipping. It's not right. I don't want an apartment because they won't take my dog. I have photos of what the place looked like before and after. The mean machine went in and destroyed things. I can't even mow the lawn now completely. Too much of it is rock, so I have to use the weed eater. Fencing is gone, so I feel vulnerable now. There used to be an apple tree over the edge of the fence. It's gone. That was on my previous landlord's side. Beautiful lilac bush we enjoyed is gone. This is the house across the street that was remodeled.
Ma'am. Not to rush you, we do have a
Here's
timer.
what the yard now looks like, no fencing.
Could we give you a few more seconds and perhaps speak with you further
My
individually
dog is sleeping on the front porch,
after the meeting?
and the birds get into his food every day out there. They think he's a pushover now.
Oh, okay. Ma'am?
There's the broken patio bricks. And what the yard looks like with nothing in it. There's my dog on the
Yeah,
side of the
yeah.
house.
Can we speak with you individually after the meeting, ma'am, and see if there's anything we can do to help? We're going to have to keep the meeting moving, though, but we'd love to speak with you as soon as we're done.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes, Ms. Whitnam?
if the speaker would like to leave her name and contact information, I would be happy to reach out to her tomorrow with some legal resources that she might be able to take advantage of.
Okay, let's try to do that. Thank you, Ms. Whitnam.
Welcome.
Sir, would you be able to help us get her name and contact info so we can follow up? Thank you, appreciate it.
That voice from the heavens there was our city attorney, who can probably connect her with some legal resources.
All right, thank you for your words.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, Mr. Young, go ahead. Please.
I just want to say that we hear you loud and clear. And just thank you for reminding us of the plight of so many people as we struggle through this issue. You know, of course, we're making progress as a city, given the services that we've been able to implement. You've heard some of the reports. But we hear you loud and clear, and please, please, please reach back out to the city and let us see what we can do. These are the very circumstances that, you know, again, that really matters to us, and it's more than just rhetoric. I just assure you that the goal is to try to help as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. All right, moving to section 5 of our agenda, our consent agenda. Council, what is your pleasure?
Mr. McDougall,
Yes, Mr. Miller.
move to approve consent agenda items A through E.
Mr. McDougall, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Without any further discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. We'll move on to section 6, other business. And first item of business, Mr. Hoagland with the finance update, the mid-year finance update.
Thank you, Mr. McDougall, members of the council, and members of the audience. Okay. Oh, okay. Bear with me just a moment, see if I can get the, get it squared into the screen a little better. Okay, so this first chart, all of these charts I think will look familiar. It's the same format we've used for quite some time now. I did want to point out an error that was pointed out to me right before the meeting started. So this is the overall tax chart where we show the primary tax revenue streams. You'll see the second line down below the chart itself is utility tax, showing a budget of $4.393 million and actuals of $1.1 million. That is incorrect. This information comes off of an Excel spreadsheet that I maintain, and I had the percentage, or I had the cell for the actuals going to the wrong worksheet. The amount of actuals is actually 2.18 million, and that works out to 49.65% collection for that utility tax on the overall so far. So I'll get an updated copy of that chart into the council packet after this. But we'll go through some of these in a little more detail. But property tax, we've received first half property tax, which comes in May. On my header here says January through May. I apologize, it's actually through June. But as far as property tax goes, we'll get two primary shots of property tax revenue during the year in May and November. So we're at 3.1 million of our 5.3 budget. Our sales tax, we're slightly over 52% collection for the year. TBD. We'll talk about all of these more on a detailed level in a little bit. I think I have everything split out here elsewhere. But the overall picture, even with the error of 25.4%, you can see we're riding at, based on that incomplete collection of 49%. So all of this to show that our sales tax collections are not only meeting, but actually exceeding expectation at this point, midway through 2021. So looking at sales tax at a little more detailed level, the data down here through June, so the tax receipts are 2 months behind the actual sales. So the money that we receive in June is from sales that were made in April. And you can see we're at a healthy level of 16.5% above what we have budgeted for the year. So total collections of 2.5 million against a year-to-date budget of 2.1 million. So, and those categories, those retail sales categories, they haven't really changed over the past year, but I would point out one thing that we've talked about since the COVID pandemic has set in and all the associated quarantine measures and things of that nature, our online shopping platforms are performing much stronger now than they were in pre-pandemic times, but our overall sales tax receipts are roughly the same. Utility tax, so you may remember that we charge utility tax both on private utilities and public utilities. The private utilities are natural gas, electricity, cable TV, telephone service, and commercial solid waste service. And you may remember from discussions last year, this has been kind of an ongoing issue in the private utility tax sector, that several areas, a couple areas, there's only several primary areas that we charge that private utility tax on, but it's been steadily dropping over the last several years. And so you may remember last year it bumped up a little bit. We were over budget because we'd been decreasing our budget for that every year. Last year, I think due to the quarantine measures, there were perhaps more cable TV subscriptions, and so that revenue stream was up a little bit. So I budgeted a 3% increase in this revenue stream this year, which has not come to be. So you can see right here, we're actually at 0.9% above our budget, or our performance through last year, but we're 2.2% under budget. So looking on the public side, though, the public utility tax is assessed against the city utilities, coming in at 7.2% above budget. So the overall utility tax revenue stream is slightly above budget. So that's right where we like to see it. The TBD sales tax, Transportation Benefit District, this is the 2/10 sales tax that's allocated to road maintenance, outperforming. You can see the historical numbers there over the last couple of years. And there was a change. We used to collect the TBD fees rather than the tax, but related to sales tax and retail sales have been strong. And then this revenue stream, this TBD sales tax, will be part of the budget amendment that we'll talk about in a little bit too. I want to make an accounting change just to for ease and clarification in our accounting system, and I'll explain that a little more when we get to the budget amendment. The header on this one is not didn't print. I apologize for that, but this is the affordable housing sales tax, and the one thing I really wanted to point out on this is the state credit that the city is getting back from related to affordable housing, because City Council took that initiative, got the resolution on the ballot for the voters to decide about that sales tax. Because that was passed, we were able to obtain that full credit from the state, which is a significant amount of money. It's about 12.5% of the total that we're receiving. Building permits, I apologize on this one too. I just realized that I didn't update this green line. The green line is supposed to be the sum of, in this case, January through June, so you can compare apples to apples. We've so far this year collected $334,000 in building permit revenues through 2021. I don't have that updated here, though. I apologize, but you can see compared year to year, building activity continues to be quite strong in the city of Anacortes. And through June, we've issued 38 single-family resident building permits compared to 57 last year and 52 the year before, so slightly ahead of the pace we were on the last 2 years. Lodging tax, this is so great to see. The column on the far right here shows the monthly change between 2020 and 2021. You can see the last 2 months, June and May, have really jumped. So where we had been, seeing those decreasing revenues every month, we're finally back into positive territory. So now, not only back, but you can see the 45,000 collected in June outpaces anything we've done historically in that month. This is a look at the revenues just in the general fund. And this isn't something I always include, but it kind of printed out on the set of charts that that I was preparing for this presentation and thought I would include it. There's nothing really, different or unusual, but you can see the various revenue streams in addition to the tax revenues, licenses and permits, shared revenues, all of those coming in at where meeting our expectations, if not exceeding expectations. I'd point out this, the general fund cash reserve reliance. So this is the amount of funding that we're relying on the general fund balance or cash reserves. And this is in conjunction with the fiber line of credit that we have specifically to fund fiber, but some of the other projects that specifically things that we have added through the budget amendment process this year, we're supporting through those cash reserves. But in each category, general fund or general taxes, over 53% collection. When you look at the general categories, we're over half in all of these categories for the most part, which is great. The one difference here, county public safety sales tax rebate, I budgeted 120, the actual was 140. This is the rebate that we get from Skagit County in relation to the public safety sales tax that we transfer to the county to support the Skagit County Jail. And what this amount is, it's written into our interlocal agreements. Burlington got a similar agreement, but that's to recognize that the amount of sales tax that the city of Anacortes is generating that goes to the county to support the jail, that amount of sales tax exceeds the amount of impact that the city of Anacortes has on the jail. So that's what that rebate is about. So overall, looking, dropping down to the bottom of the list, we're at 45% collection, even considering we have barely tapped into that fiber line of credit yet, so it's a little bit skewed because of that. So, but overall, revenue streams in the general fund, right where we would expect to see them. This is the expenditures in the general fund by department. There's really nothing unusual here. Everybody's tracking pretty closely to 50%. One of the differences is data processing. That's our IT department. They're a little bit higher. They spend a lot of money early in the year to buy replacement computers, things like that. HR is down pretty significantly, recognizing we have not had to pay for an HR director this year. So it's reflected there. Facilities at 73% of spending their budget. They're always quite busy taking care of the needs of our city buildings.
Mr. McDougall?
Mr. Walters? Yeah.
Although we haven't had a full-time HR director, we have had somebody fulfilling that role. Is she billing HR? Are we tracking that time?
So we have recently made a change to the allocation for the administrative services director's time. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want that getting that time and the associated costs getting allocated to fiber if that's not what the time's being spent on.
Yes. Yeah, she was very conscientious about that, and we have recognized that and made the change in the payroll system to allocate more of her time to the HR department than had been originally budgeted.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. McDougall?
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Shoup.
30% of my time is being allocated to the Human Resources and Labor Relations function and wages associated with that.
All right, thank you.
So dropping down to, this is that list just showing all of the city funds. Nothing unusual here. I would point out again that when you look, the way this is set out by fund, and then there's a row for revenues and a row for expenditures. The first column being budget, second column is actuals. Several of our funds show a little bit ahead of schedule on the revenue side. Parks at 55%, cemetery 61%, library at 58%. Those funds are very reliant on property tax, and because the first half property tax came in May, it kind of inflates that revenue for a little bit. And then the same thing will happen once we get into the October timeframe. It'll look way down until they get that second half property tax. The street maintenance fund is a little low, and that's because street maintenance fund relies heavily on interfund transfers. One of them is the TBD fund, which I mentioned earlier. We have budgeted $1.1 million in both revenues and expenditures in that fund. All of that gets transferred directly to the street maintenance fund. So if you consider that 600,000 being transferred up to road maintenance, that puts it at nearly $1 million. And then there's some other, I believe, REIT, no impact fees, but some other REIT transfers that will take place as well. So, yeah, again, we'll talk a little more about that in the budget amendment. There's been a little bit of work in the street construction fund that we haven't done the transfers for yet. Washington Park, revenues are up significantly over what we would expect. I mean, the summertime is always the busiest time out there. That's when they really make their money, during those few months of the summer. But even looking what they're doing this year historically, they're exceeding anything they've done before. It's really fantastic. The affordable housing, this is a 1/10, so you may remember Fund 106, TBD, that's a 2/10 sales tax. Affordable housing is 1/10. We have agreements in place with the Anacortes Family Center. That's what those expenditures are, $259,000 every month. That revenue comes in. Half of that gets transferred right back out to the AFC. We're currently still working with the Anacortes Housing Authority to get their agreement in place. Once that's in place, then that same thing will happen with the Housing Authority. Wanted to drop down to the utilities. I have this a little bit of additional information on the side, these boxes on the side of the utilities. For water, sewer, and storm drain, we collect GFCs, general facilities charges, that are part of the building permit cost and are allocated or dedicated to capital. So they're restricted for capital. Those capital monies are very significant. They're significant in all of the funds, but especially the water fund, where we have those other wholesale customers. So I like to, instead of just looking at the total level in the utilities, I like to take a look at the split between the charges. That's what CHGS is supposed to stand for, charges. So the charges for service, which is the consumption charges, versus the capital budget charges, and what our collection is based on those. So our capital budget, we're exceeding what we had budgeted there, and that's not from any way that we are establishing the payment plan with our water customers. It's me updating that budget level. So we updated the wholesale contracts a few years ago to implement a 3-year moving average to establish those rates. And I just haven't been on top of getting those numbers into these monitoring worksheets. But that's kind of it for there. Nothing unusual jumps out at me. I did include, this is the capital worksheet that I use. Please let me know if this is useful, or if capital would be easier to look at in a different format. But the way this is laid out, there's a different project on each row. The first column over here has the fund number. So Fund 104 is the road maintenance fund. 105 is the road construction fund. 108 is the parks construction fund. And then the amount of budget for each of these projects within those funds: ADA ramps, we budgeted $100,000. Sidewalks, we budgeted $200,000. And then the different resources that were used to support that budget. And then over on the far right side, the actuals year-to-date through June. So those have been updated through June, so you can compare where we're at versus what was budgeted. And then if you wanted to tie back, like for example, Fund 105, $288,000 in capital spending, you could go back to this chart and see that total spending is $295,000. 288 of that is capital, so almost all of spending so far out of 105 has been capital. So that's about what I had for the finance update. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. McDougall?
Mr. Young?
No, I just wanted to comment about this extra document that you put in, and also just the attention to detail such that those of us that may not be on the finance committee can sort of just follow along as we get the additional reports. But I find it incredibly helpful for me, and I just wanted to commend you on that, and to ask of the council sort of that if we could continue this, it would be useful. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I had a quick one, actually. We show we're about 10% ahead on revenue collection on the affordable housing sales tax. And I'm trying to remember, does that mean we're 10% ahead on the state sort of partial match, or is the state match kind of a fixed number?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that's 109. So the credit from the state is based on the amount of collection for the city. So there should be a direct correlation in what our collection is locally to that credit that we get back from the state. I know we do have a lot of shared revenues that are sales tax generated, but they're redistributed on a per capita basis. And it's interesting to see some of those compared to what we're doing here locally as far as retail sales versus those shared revenues based on a per capita. Generally, our activity here in the city is higher than what you see in the rest of the state generally.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's good to see overall things look good, and I'm really encouraged by that one in particular to see that we're running ahead revenue-wise. So thank you. All right, if nothing else on the finance update, thank you, Mr. Hoagland.
Thank you.
And we'll move to 6B, Ordinance 3093, amending the 2021 budget. Looks like you're back on.
All right, thank you. So, yes, Ordinance 3093, amending the annual budget. So this is a few whereases related to the activity here in the body of the ordinance. Maybe if I may, I'll bring up these. I put a few slides together. Hopefully this will help in understanding what we're doing. So one of the items in the budget amendment is in the police department, and it's for body cameras. And I know Chief Floyd is planning on coming back to council in a week or two to talk more about this, and along with the contract that goes along with this item. But what this is about, there was a legislation that came out of the current or the last legislative session that enacted requirements for electronic recordings of custodial interrogations for law enforcement agencies. So I'm talking with Chief Floyd. He said they didn't specifically say you had to use body cameras, but there really wasn't an efficient or effective way to do that without getting body cams. So they obtained quotes for 28 cameras. The vendor that they're looking at would go with a 5-year contract, or we could go with a 5-year contract with them. It was slightly over $100,000 for the whole 5 years for all 28 cameras, and that included delivery and training. The first year payment requirement is $26,630. The next 4 years would be about $18,000. So that's the first item on the budget amendment. The next item I have here is what I've talked about a couple times now, the Transportation Benefit District Sales Tax, which is Fund 106, and then Fund 104, which is the Road Maintenance Fund, where that money goes. So the TBD was initially established with Ordinance 2926, and at that time, TBDs were required to be established as separate legal entities. They are an accounting entity that's known as a component unit. And in our case, it was a blended component unit because it was the same set of legislators that oversaw the TBD as the city. So There was a change in the, and it was, so we set up a separate fund, Fund 106, and that's where we started to and continue to receipt the revenues and then transfer them out to Fund 104. So a change in the legislation allowed the city to assume the rights and obligations of the TBD, which we did with Ordinance 2967. So we no longer have a separate legal entity. The TBD is now essentially just a function of the city. But we never changed the accounting system, so that money still flows in and out of Fund 106 to 104. So what that does is it creates a double budget effect. You remember when we were looking at that, it was roughly 1.1 million estimated revenues and expenditures. So the money comes into Fund 106, we receipt it in as revenue, and then we transfer it out to the road maintenance fund. So we book that as an expenditure. So we have, revenue and an expenditure of $1.1 million. When that 1.1 transfer goes into the road maintenance fund, it's booked as a revenue as well, and then spent, of course, on road maintenance. So we have 2 receipts of $1.1 million and 2 expenditures of $1.1 million. That now is unnecessary, and we can change the accounting system so that TBD sales tax would be booked directly into Fund 104. So that's what I'm requesting in the budget ordinance tonight to just clean up our accounting a little bit for those TBD revenues and expenditures. The last item is in the street department. There are a number of school zone beacons, the flashing light beacons in the city. They were all installed about the same time, and a number of them are failing. They are obsolete. Repair is not really effective. The Public Works Department pursued a grant earlier in the year, was not awarded the grant, but we still have the need for those beacons to be replaced. So the most obvious resource that we have to use to replace those beacons is real estate excise tax, which includes inclusion on the capital facilities plan. And the capital facilities plan amendment is required to be done in conjunction with a budget amendment, but because of the additional, there's a 2-week notice requirement for a public hearing that's out to add right now. So what I'm doing tonight is just introducing both the budget amendment and CFP amendment for your consideration. And then in 2 weeks after the notice requirements have been met, we'll have a public hearing for the CFP, and then both those items would be on the agenda for adoption by council. But the quote is for 20 units at nearly $112,000. The beacons are available on state contracts, so we don't need to go to formal bid for those. So once these items are in place, they can directly contract for those beacons, and then city staff will do the work to replace those. CFP Amendment Ordinance 3094, I think I just talked about some of this, but the CFP needs to be amended in conjunction with the city budget. Anacortes Municipal Code requires a public hearing to amend the CFP and a 2-week notice of that public hearing. One of the other requirements is consistency with the city budget, so anything added to the CFP needs to be added to the annual budget. And then there's some contact information there for members of the public if they have information or have questions or want more information. So that's the information I had. The ordinance here in the whereases, I tried to outline that same information that we just went through in the PowerPoint, and then the sum of those transactions is here. So the body cam hardware, $26,000, the interfund transfer out, and the TBD sales tax of $1.1 million to combine that with Fund 104, and then the school zone beacons at $112,000. So all of the transactions are kind of listed out there. I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of that budget amendment information.
Mr. McDougall?
Mr. Walters?
Not a question, but I just think that the school zone beacons are a really good opportunity to get that fixed. They've been a real pain in the beacon to deal with these things over the years. A lot of staff time, and if we're able to get them for a little more than $5,000 a piece, it's well worth it, because it's not anywhere near the same level of effectiveness as the continuously flashing beacon, where it's just, you get used to it. It's much, much better. So I have an expectation that these are going to actually work, unlike the other ones, but assuming that that's true, it's well worth it.
All right, thank you. So this will be back in 2 weeks.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, yep. Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. And in your presentation, you introduced 3094. Do we have any additional specifics on 3094, or can we move right on to item D?
Yeah, I don't think so. I did include these worksheets. It's a pretty simple amendment. This is the summary of the transportation CFP, and I highlighted in orange or yellow the change, adding 112,000 to that total transportation request, and then using REIT. The summary information is here, is what was transferred onto the CFP amendment as well. So, yeah, unless there's any other questions, I didn't have anything additionally.
Looks like we're good up here. So, yeah, we can move on to item 6D, the contract award for the flashing beacons for the school zones.
Mr. McDougall?
Walters.
Well, I guess my question on this is it proper to take action on this before we've amended the CFP to pay for it?
I guess that would be up to council. I personally, if we've done this kind of thing in the past where we've kind of got the head nod and then, come back with the official paperwork later, I think if council is comfortable with the CFP and budget amendment as they are, I don't think from like an auditor standpoint we would be in any kind of hot water.
For me, if Mr. Buckenmeyer said we need to order them right now so that they're in place by the time the school year starts, that'd be good enough for me.
We need to order them right now so they're in place before school starts.
Mr. McDougall.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I knew he would say that, but I mean, the bottom line is we're authorizing the mayor to sign the contract, and we'll rely on the mayor to execute it once it's properly legal, and again to meet the timeline as well.
Get them ordered.
All right, yeah.
Motion to approve.
Head nod, motion to approve. What's?
Perfect, thank you.
Yep, head nod. All right, so concluding item 6D, we'll move to
Mr. McDougall. We're getting the stink eye from Ms. Hunt.
Was there a motion and a second and a vote on that contract?
No, there was a head nod. Is it something that we should? There needs to be a vote
to authorize the mayor if you wish to allow her to sign that contract.
Okay.
So moved.
Do we have a motion?
Mr. McDougall, second.
Yes.
Second.
Oh, who moved originally?
Oh.
Okay, thank you. Motion from Mr. Walters, second from Mr. Moulton. Yeah.
Mr. McDougall, discussion?
Any further discussion?
Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead, I feel like that was enough to be recognized for that. Is this for the contract award for the school flashing zones? Because I thought my discussion was, hey, we have to, by by rule and tradition, we bring the ordinances back next week. I thought we were just discussing, hey, we can go ahead and discuss the contract award and then authorize the mayor to sign that. Or what exactly was the motion? What were we motioning to vote for?
Just authorize the contract approval.
Okay, so I have a question on that contract.
Go for it.
Okay.
Sorry, I got
So,
confused.
yeah, I don't want Mr. Buckmeyer to get off that easy. My two questions that came to my mind were, how old are the current beacons, and is this the same, and that's not nearly as important as, is this the same company that we got them from previously?
Thank you, Mr. No, they're not. That's not the same company. That company, I don't even know if they're in business anymore. They almost immediately, we started having problems and a lack of service on the old ones.
Okay, yep, that's what I remember, and I'm all good with that. Okay, that was it. So we've got, as far as I know, there's a motion and a second for this contract.
All right, yeah, apologies for the confusion, rookie mistake there on my part. Ms. Hunt, will you take the roll?
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, now we get to go to item 6E, our critical areas ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I would like to introduce Tess Cooper. She's online with us this evening. And I would like to say that, you know, what we have before us this evening is the critical areas ordinance has taken a lot of work and a lot of time. And I really appreciate all the comments that we received from the public. The input from the Planning Commission and the City Council has brought us to what I feel is a very good document that can easily be administered by staff and understandable by the public. With that, I'd like to introduce Ms. Tess Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Meismer. Ms. Cooper, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Meismer. Thank you, Council. I'm excited to be here tonight with the final version of the critical area ordinance and regulations that we've all worked so hard on to get here. Just a minute here. So tonight we're here, Hope Critical Area Regulations as amended and as required for the Growth Management Act's periodic update. We have spent 12 Planning Commission and 11 City Council meetings with the public and committee members working really hard on this. You can see kind of the distribution of meetings. To date, we've made all of the edits to the regulations text as attachment A per council direction. We've added findings supporting council's changes and incorporated those into the draft ordinance of 3064. We will continue to make any minor non-substantive text edits if needed for cross-reference corrections, syntax errors, and so forth. But today we are ready to adopt. And if we approve this ordinance this evening, it means it will potentially go into effect in 5 days, which is as of Monday, August 2nd. Potentially. You all have received a copy. We can certainly go through it, answer any questions, have any discussion if necessary. But ultimately, tonight, staff recommends that council moves to adopt the ordinance. Do we have any questions or discussion this evening?
Mr. McDougall?
Ms. Moulton.
This is just a date question on the, thank you, Ms. Cooper, by the way. Thanks for all your hard work in getting us to this point. I really appreciate you. The third whereas of Ordinance 3064 says, whereas on July 22nd, 2018, the City Council completed the required review and revision of the development regulations. Was it 2018 or was it 2019?
I'm sorry, Ms. Moulton, could you repeat your question?
Okay, so I thought my understanding was that we adopted the development regulations update in 2019, but the third whereas says 2018 as written.
Oh. That correct. That is one of those syntax errors that will need to be fixed. Thank you.
Thanks.
And it is fixed as of now.
Mr. McDougall.
Yeah, Mr. Miller.
So I guess this will be the third time I'm asking the question about accessory dwelling units. And were we able to talk to any experts about the impact of an accessory dwelling unit versus a garage? Again, logic tells me when you're parking a car in a garage, it probably has more impact versus in somebody living in a garage. And we just heard some emotional, compelling testimony. So it's still about having places to live. It's still a concern of mine that I've had from the beginning. However, if there's not a second on council to even try to answer the question, then I suppose I can just move on. But I figure that just an answer from somebody about my question about accessory dwelling units versus garage.
So the question that I guess we're seeking additional feedback from council is whether we does the council want to consider ADUs as the definition of normal appurtenances for the reasonable use, the outright reasonable use of single family residences under the permitted alteration. We have the term in there as normal appurtenances and we list them. So if we don't necessarily nail this down tonight, that's okay. We could certainly do a director's policy interpretation through further discussions with the planning committee if we want to determine. But if we have a strong feeling tonight, if whether that should, does anybody have strong feelings one way or another?
Mr. McDougall?
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. Ms. Cooper, could you remind us where that is in the document so I can take a quick look? Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And I can bring it up for you as well. It's
that would be great.
Permitted alterations. Are you all seeing my screen?
We are not.
Okay.
Looks like page 21.
Correct. Family dwellings on existing lots may intrude into critical areas or their buffers when all of the following conditions are met. So single family residences and normal appurtenances. So we made a clarification in E. The normal appurtenances included in this provision include garages, decks, and walkways incidental to residential living and do not constitute a special privilege.
I have another question, follow-up.
Yeah, please.
Thanks. So an ADU would be a residence, right? Itself, so can it qualify under, so my reading is that it's a residence, so it's not a normal appurtenance, but I'd be interested to hear if anyone else has thoughts on that.
Mr. McDougall.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Miller.
All right, I guess since I'm the only one who feels strongly about this, I'm just wondering when somebody goes into, and they're in a buffer, and they want to build a garage, they can build a garage, but they can't build an accessory dwelling unit. So I would ask if the planning director could answer that question based on interpretation of this.
Mr. McDougall?
Can we have Mr. Meismer go first and then Ms. Moulton?
Sure. Thanks. Sorry.
So based on the current, thank you, Mr. McDougall. Based on the current reading, normal appurtenances included as prohibited include garages, decks, walkways, incidental to residential living, and that do not constitute a special permit. So incidental to residential living, in my opinion, would not include an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, based on this language, garages, decks, and walkways could be included, but an ADU would not be included based upon this language, or would not be allowed.
If the council were so inclined to include accessory dwelling units in this particular language, you could certainly do that through tonight's adoption process.
Okay. Ms. Moulton?
Well, my question though is that also single-family residences is called out here in the heading. So
Correct.
Doesn't that include it?
So it's, in my opinion, it would be going a bit further out of bounds, so to speak, if you don't mind my saying that. Because what we're looking at is an appurtenance. An appurtenance is typically a storage shed, a deck, a garage, which, you know, and the same things occur throughout the Shorelines Master Program. Appurtenances are considered garage, decks, sheds, fences, things like that, not another residential living unit.
Ask one more
Yeah,
question.
go for it.
McDougall. So I just have one question, kind of getting into the weeds there. So what if it's a garage on the main floor and an ADU above? How does that be interpreted?
So in that case, that meets the accessory dwelling unit provisions, which would allow one on top of the garage. So as long as it you know, you're still looking at, you have a garage, now you're going to go on top of that garage with an accessory dwelling unit. You're not impacting the buffer any further because you've already built a garage. You're going on top.
Mr. McDougall.
Mr. Miller.
I'm much more comfortable with that answer as opposed to the first answer, and it makes me feel better about voting for the regulation as written.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments up at the table here?
Mr. McDougall.
Mr. Walters.
Yeah, I just wanted to get some clarity on page 4 of the document, which is titled Attachment A. It makes reference to modifying Table 1920-0301, and we have another document, I think, that actually makes that change. Is it our intent to include that as part of Exhibit A, the Chapter 1920 document? Tess, can you hear us? She does look frozen.
Yeah.
We may have lost connection.
Yeah. Oh. Tess, are you there? She was having some bandwidth issues there on her internet.
Okay. So I guess my only concern there is simply that the document attached as 1920 is 21 pages, and as far as I can tell, all we're doing is modifying that one table.
That's correct.
And
Just
it's not
modifying
shown in strike through or underline.
We will go ahead and make sure that we strike through and underline on that so that it is very clear.
Okay, and then I guess I would propose that we only include the table and not all the pages. I do think our code publishing fees are based on the number of pages we send to them. But then the next line on attachment A, 1978 clearing and grading section reference to critical area activities not subject to clearing and grading thresholds. Mr. Meismer, can you articulate what that means?
There were a couple of suggested edits from, as I recall, the Department of Ecology in regards to clearing and grading, is that it does not apply in wetlands or wetland buffers. To make it very clear that even though we might issue a cleared and graded, it doesn't apply to wetlands, wetland buffers. I'll make sure that we do a strike through and underline on this so that it's clear what changes are being made.
Okay, that is reminding me. I think maybe we had a strike through and underline our last meeting about this, but maybe we lost it here. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? All right. Anyone from the audience like to address the council on this issue? Or anyone who is connected, dialed in remotely to the Zoom meeting would like to speak with the council? All right. I guess, how would you all like to proceed?
Mr. McDougall?
Mr. Walters?
I do wish that one line there that said 1978 clearing and grading section reference, that was a little cleaner. But if Mr. Miesenberg is telling us we will attach that strike through that was given to us last meeting, along with the strike through on the permit processes table, then I tend to think that we're ready to approve.
If that's a motion, I'll second it.
Just to confirm, motion. Okay. So we have a motion by Mr. Walters, a second by Mr. Young. Ms. Hunt, would you?
Is that including the correction mentioned by Ms. Moulton to the date in the third whereas?
Yes,
Thank you.
please. All right. Any further discussion? All right. Ms. Hunt, would you call the roll?
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Thank you all for a tremendous amount of work that went into this, and thank you, members of the community, for the comments, the suggestions, the edits. This has been a major process, and really glad that we've got it across the finish line. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And with that, and thank you, Ms. Cooper, as well. If you come back and catch the recording, thank you so much for all your efforts on this. And with that, we'll adjourn tonight's meeting. So thank you.